Late at night, deep in the mountains, silence can sometimes hide things that should never exist. In 2019, a group of friends traveled to a remote mountain valley in Colorado for a peaceful camping trip. The place was known for its breathtaking views, endless forests, and complete isolation. But what they experienced that night was something they would never forget. Something that followed them in the darkness. Something that walked around their tent like it was studying them. And the most terrifying part? Whatever was outside was not an animal. My name is Alaric Vance, and this happened to me in the summer of 2019 in Black Hollow Valley, Colorado. At the time, I was 27 years old, and I had gone on a mountain trip with 4 of my closest friends. Their names were Kaylin Stroud, Riven Calder, Soraya Whitlock, and Tamsin Hale. We had planned the trip for weeks. We wanted a break from the city, from noise, from work, and from everything stressful in our lives. Black Hollow Valley was the perfect place. The area was quiet, surrounded by thick forests, tall cliffs, and long winding trails that led deep into the mountains. We reached the valley around late afternoon. The sun was still shining, and the entire place looked peaceful. The mountains were covered in pine trees, and a cold breeze flowed through the valley. Kaylin immediately started setting up the tent while Soraya and Tamsin prepared a small campfire. Riven and I walked a little further down the trail to explore the area. The place felt isolated, but in a good way. At least, that's what we thought at the time. As we walked deeper into the trees, I noticed something strange. The forest was extremely quiet. There were no birds, no insects, no distant animal sounds. Just silence. I remember looking at Riven and saying, "Doesn't it feel too quiet here?" Riven laughed and said it was probably just because we were far from civilization. At that moment, we didn't think much of it. By the time evening arrived, we were all sitting around the campfire. The sky above us was filled with stars, brighter than anything we had ever seen in the city. Kaylin was telling random jokes while Soraya kept throwing small pine cones into the fire. Everything felt normal. But then something happened that changed the mood completely. From somewhere deep in the forest, we heard a long, distant scream. It didn't sound like a wolf. It didn't sound like a coyote. It sounded almost human. Everyone froze. Tamsin looked at us nervously and said, "Did you guys hear that?" Kaylin tried to act brave and said it was probably just an animal. But I could see it in everyone's faces. No one believed that. After a few minutes, we decided to ignore it and continue our night. But the energy around the campfire had changed. No one was laughing anymore. The darkness around us suddenly felt heavier. Around 11 p.m., we all went inside the tent. The wind outside had grown stronger, and the temperature dropped quickly. The forest had become completely dark. So dark that even the moonlight could barely reach the ground through the tall trees. At first, everything seemed normal. We were talking quietly, sharing stories, and slowly drifting toward sleep. Then suddenly, we heard footsteps. Very slow footsteps. Outside the tent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. At first, we thought it might be a deer or some other animal passing by. But then the footsteps stopped, right next to the tent. No one inside moved. No one even breathed. Then something happened that made my heart stop. The footsteps began circling the tent. Slowly, like something was walking around us, watching us, studying us. Tamsin whispered, "Guys, animals don't walk in circles like that." No one replied, because we were all thinking the exact same thing. The footsteps suddenly stopped. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then, something scratched the side of the tent. Very slowly. Soraya grabbed my arm so tightly I could feel her hands shaking. The scratching sound continued for a few seconds. Then it stopped. Kaylin slowly reached for the flashlight beside him. He whispered, "I'm going to check outside." Before anyone could stop him, he slowly opened the tent zipper. The cold mountain air rushed inside. Kalen pointed the flashlight into the darkness. The beam of light moved across the trees, the ground, the rocks. But there was nothing there. No animals. No movement. No sound. Just the silent forest. Kalen stepped slightly outside and looked around. See? Nothing. Suddenly he stopped talking. His flashlight froze in one direction. His entire body went stiff. I whispered, "Kalen, what do you see?" But he didn't answer. Then slowly, very slowly, Kalen stepped backward into the tent and quietly closed the zipper. His face had completely changed. He looked pale, terrified. I asked him again, "What did you see?" Kalen stared at all of us and whispered something that made my blood run cold. He said, "There's someone standing between the trees." But the most terrifying part was what he said next. "It's been standing there the whole time, watching us." When Kalen said there was someone standing between the trees, none of us spoke for a few seconds. The tent suddenly felt very small and suffocating. I could hear Soraya breathing heavily beside me. "Someone," Riven whispered. "Like a person?" Kalen slowly shook his head. "I don't know, but it's still there." No one wanted to open the tent again. But the idea of someone watching us from the forest was even worse. After a few seconds, Kalen carefully opened the zipper again, just enough to peek outside. He raised the flashlight and pointed it toward the same direction. The beam cut through the darkness and reached the trees. But this time, there was nothing there. The space between the trees was empty. Completely empty. Kalen stepped back inside. "It's gone," he said quietly. For a moment, we all felt relieved. Maybe it really was just a hiker passing by. Maybe our minds were playing tricks on us. But that relief didn't last long. Because a few seconds later, we heard footsteps again. Not far away. Right behind the tent. Crunch. 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 Tamsin suddenly grabbed Kalen's arm. "It moved," she whispered. "Whatever you saw, it moved behind us." My heart was pounding so loudly I thought the thing outside could hear it. The footsteps continued slowly, walking around the tent again. But this time, they sounded heavier. Much heavier. Then suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Right behind me. On the other side of the tent wall. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The silence was unbearable. Then something pressed lightly against the tent. From the outside, the fabric slowly pushed inward, like something was leaning against it. Soraya gasped quietly. I could feel my entire body freezing, because the shape pressing against the tent didn't look like an animal. It looked tall, too tall. Then we heard something that made everything worse. Breathing. Slow, heavy, and very close. No one moved. No one spoke. We just sat there, completely frozen, listening to that thing breathing right outside the tent. Then suddenly, it started walking again. But this time the footsteps moved away, deeper into the forest. After a full minute of silence, Kalen whispered, "We're leaving." No one argued. It didn't matter if it was the middle of the night. We weren't staying there any longer. We quickly packed the most important things, grabbed our flashlights, and stepped out of the tent. The forest felt colder than before, and the darkness between the trees looked almost solid. We started walking quickly toward the trail that led back to the parking area. No one spoke. The only sounds were our footsteps and the wind moving through the trees. But after about 5 minutes of walking, Riven suddenly stopped. "Do you hear that?" We all listened carefully. At first, there was nothing. Then, from somewhere behind us, we heard footsteps again, following us. Crunch, 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 and they were getting closer. "Run," Kalen said quietly. And that was all we needed to hear. We started running down the trail as fast as we could. Branches scratched our arms as we pushed through the darkness. The forest seemed endless, but the footsteps behind us were getting louder. Faster. Closer. Then suddenly Soraya screamed, "Don't look back!" Of course, that only made it worse. I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head for a split second, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. Between the trees, something tall was running after us. Its body looked thin and twisted. Its arms were far too long, and its movements were completely unnatural, almost like it wasn't used to running like a human. But the worst part was its face. Even in the darkness, I could see its eyes reflecting the light from our flashlights. Bright, white, and locked directly on us. We ran faster than we ever had in our lives. None of us stopped. None of us looked back again. After what felt like forever, we finally saw the parking area lights in the distance. We jumped into the car and slammed the doors shut. Kalen started the engine immediately. As the headlights turned on, they illuminated the edge of the forest behind us. And for 1 second, we saw something standing between the trees. Oh, motionless, watching us. Then Kalen hit the gas, and we drove away from Black Hollow Valley as fast as we could. None of us ever went back there, and we never spoke about that night again. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about the way that thing was watching us, like it had been waiting for someone to enter its forest. If you enjoyed this true horror story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real and terrifying stories. Also, if you have ever experienced something strange while camping, traveling, or being alone in the mountains or forests, share your story in the comment section. Your experience might help others, and it might even be featured in a future video. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family who love horror stories and paranormal mysteries.